It's Nayenwa, and today we will be making my childhood favorite dumpling and cocoa tea. Now, if you don't know, I was originally born in St. Lucia, and I am from the southern part of the island. My grandparents, my parents, my family always made this, so it's become somewhat of a comfort food for me. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so because I'm gonna be cooking some more. Just a reminder, I am not a chef, I'm just a girl who likes to eat a lot. I did get my bay leaf, aka boaden, my cocoa stick, and my cinnamon from St. Lucia. You should be able to get pretty much everything outside of the cocoa stick from the store. You might need a St. Lucian friend or Caribbean friend or connect to get you the cocoa stick. If you are not familiar with making dumplings, I do suggest starting with that first so that you will not have to rush the process when it's time to drop them into the cocoa tea. Fun fact, the cocoa stick is made from the seeds of the cacao plant, which is photographed right here in the top left-hand corner. We have a lot of the trees in St. Lucia. It is what you use to make chocolate. And this is what I think makes it a comfort food for me is the chocolatey goodness that comes from the cocoa stick and the cocoa tea. If you do not have raw nutmeg, it's perfectly fine to use the store-bought version. If you are lazy and don't want to grate your cocoa stick, you can cut a piece off and drop it in the pan. It will just take a little bit longer to cook. When it comes to flavoring, I definitely suggest using whichever essence you prefer, especially if you've been making cocoa tea for a long time. I prefer almond and vanilla. A lot of people use all essence, but again, it's really up to you and your preference. When it comes to dumpling, I do make it slightly different than if I was making it for a soup or a bouillon. I do add a little bit of sugar in there, some salt, of course, and just a dash of nutmeg, which is optional, just to give it a little bit more flavor. Now, again, if you are not used to making dumplings, I suggest doing it before you start your cocoa tea, but it does take a lot less water than you would for, say, a bakes. You do want the dough to be quite thick and tough. You don't want any soft dumplings because then it might not cook all the way through. This is another part of the dumpling making that might be different for certain people. I prefer to cut and shape my dumplings right away in mass. Some people will take a piece off, roll it into shape, and then drop it into the pan. I prefer to shape it completely and then cut them all up and then drop them into the pan. So just make sure that you knead your dough and shape it all the way through before you start dropping it into the pan. And if you do prefer to cut and roll and drop it, that's perfectly fine too. Again, you know what works best for you. This is just the way that I prefer doing it. As you can see in the plate below, I've already cut up one of my pieces of dough into dumplings. I like it this size because it gives me the perfect cocoa tea to dumpling ratio in a spoonful. If you want to make it bigger or smaller, that's perfectly fine. This size is just my preference. Now it is time to drop them bad boys in the pot. Now, in order to make the cocoa tea a little bit thicker and to also make it a little bit richer tasting, I like to add milk to it. I used to use evaporated milk, but I have had some skin issues in regards to dairy, so I've switched to coconut milk. I know some people like to use toloma, also known as arrowroot, but I prefer to use flour to thicken it. So in this case, I am using coconut milk and flour to thicken and increase the flavor of my cocoa tea. Again, it's really a thing of preference. So you could try different ones until you find what's right for you. Make sure you mix it thoroughly to minimize the lumps in it. You don't want big lumps of flour or arrowroot in your cocoa tea. And make sure you strain it to get all those lumps out. Now, I also like adding a little bit of rum for flavoring. I usually use white rum. I also tried Bailey's as well this time. Just a dash added towards the end of the cooking will definitely increase the flavor. Now, there's enough in this to feed about 3 or 4 people. However, I did make it for 2 people with the intentions of having leftovers. For some reason, the taste of the rum just came out so much more on the second day. It was so delicious. But do make sure that if you are reheating it, that you add a little bit of water to avoid there being too little cocoa tea. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do try the recipe, make sure to at me on my socials at Noir. Subscribe, like, leave a comment, and come back for more food videos. Ah.